Hi everyone, my name is Victoria Fernandez and welcome to my channel. I live to inspire mental health. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. I post weekly videos about mental health and my experience with bipolar disorder. So in this week's video, I am going to talk about my compulsive thoughts and how I've dealt with them, and hopefully tips that will help you deal with them if you have them. So before we start, I do want to say that I have made several playlists for you guys to check out and find my videos in a way that it's easier for you to find exactly what you're looking for. So I wanted to talk about this topic because, as I have told you guys before, I have bipolar disorder, and with that it has come with a lot of different things, whether that's anxiety or OCD, type of compulsive thoughts that have affected me throughout my whole life. And at this point in my life, I'm at a point where I've never been better with my mental health, and I have so much control over my thoughts and over my, compulsiveness and my bipolar episodes, which at one point I thought they were impossible. But I'm hoping that I can convince you that it is possible to conquer your thoughts and your mind and actually take control over them and take control over your life. I say that because compulsive thoughts are so damaging to our mental health. Compulsive thoughts are things that drive us to do things and get us to think about terrible, terrible things whenever we don't want to. And sometimes we might feel like this is another person in our heads talking, and it isn't really us. So I personally used to struggle with this so much more than I do now when I was younger. It started at around the age of 7 years old. And if you go to my earlier videos, I do talk a little bit about this. But throughout time, I've actually learned coping mechanisms. Of course, I am also medicated for my bipolar disorder, and having those medications has lessened my symptoms when it comes to anxiety, compulsive thoughts, and just overall these things that came with the disorder. But it hasn't just been the medication, because the medication will only work if you put the work in yourself. So ultimately, now, if you ask me now if I still have compulsive thoughts, I do, but they're not very strong because I've learned to ignore them and to deal with them, and I've lessened their power. So how exactly have I done this? Well, first I want to explain some of the thoughts that I used to get and some of the thoughts I still get now, so you can kind of understand, maybe relate to some of the things that I've gone through, and to see if that's something that you've gone through as well. So whenever I was around 7 years old, that's like my closest memory to all this, I started having thoughts that were I thought of them as somebody was in my head. Like, if I called it the devil was in my head kind of thing. And basically it was like this little voice in my head was telling me that if I didn't do something, or if I didn't say a phrase, then my parents would die, or something bad would happen to people I love, or it would just have all these terrible scenarios. So I would be forced to say, may God forbid. Like, I had this little phrase in Spanish that I would just say over and over and over again. But I remember the feeling of being tormented by these thoughts because I felt like a terrible person. And I would run up to my mom and tell her everything I was thinking, because that was another thing. I felt like I had to tell her, or if not, it was going to happen. Or I felt so guilty about everything that I was thinking that I had to tell my mom, because if not, I was a terrible person. And this voice, it was so bad that there are instances that I remember, I was at a camp, and for some reason, I touched a battery, and I had heard that when you touch an old battery, it could have acids and it could hurt you or whatever. So I made my teacher take me to wash my hands around 5 times because my thoughts were just telling me to do that and do that and do it again. So basically I would attach myself to certain situations, if that makes a little sense. I would attach myself to certain circumstances and I would obsess over them. And it was really hard because as a 7-year-old, I didn't really understand what was going on. I didn't really understand why all this stuff was happening to me. And it just made me feel so terrible. And for the longest time, I was hiding these thoughts. I was hiding these feelings from people because I thought they would think they were so weird. Now, when this was happening, we were in a different time period where mental health wasn't really talked about too much. I did go to a psychologist, but it was also talking to my mom. I remember she said that they sent me because I had a lot of fears as well. So I was scared of closing the door at night. I was scared of all these different things. And I do remember crying because of these thoughts, because they were just so tormenting. The voice was so loud in my head that it wouldn't let me be normal. I would have to act upon those thoughts. I would have to say like, may God forbid, all this stuff, and say it several times. So anyways, I go to therapy, and I think for a while it got better, because there's a time in my life where I don't remember being so tormented as I was when I was 7. I think I was always still saying that phrase. It was always so with me, because there was things like, for example, let's say someone I love was driving before me. I would think that a car is going to crash into them and they're going to die. And then I would have to think of the things that I would do if that was going to happen. And then I would have to say the phrase, so then it wouldn't happen. Or, you know, as I got older, when I got diagnosed with my bipolar disorder, it's like all those things became really bad. I was around 15 years old or 16 whenever these thoughts started to become very, very obstructive again. It wasn't like, you know, just a little thought here and there. It was really bad again. And as I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, I think I was around probably 17. And I started taking medications, but unfortunately the first medications that I'm taking, I'm still having these compulsive thoughts. I'm still having to say, you know, may God forbid this happens, or, you know, I'm driving and I have to turn on the turning signal several times. Or it was like in class, oh my gosh, there was this one time where I attached myself to this action, which was like twisting my neck, like over and over and over again, to where I was in class and I could not concentrate because I had to move my neck so many times. And it's like, if like I would do it, but the action wasn't enough, and it would lead me to do it again and again and again and again, and it was so terrible. And then there was another one that was just kind of like, I would have to like move my finger like this all the time. And that was very tormenting too, because I remember I would try to like stop my hand from actually doing that, and it was so hard. So all those things have definitely affected me. They've affected me because it's been such that anxiety that I felt, you know, that led me to actually act upon these compulsive thoughts. It ruled my life for the longest time. It made me act in certain ways where I couldn't do one thing or another, and it was just a terrible feeling. Or, you know, having to, and the anxiety, obviously that collides together for me. And it was like the anxiety and the compulsive thoughts, like, you know, seeing police meant that there was going to be a shooting. Seeing this meant that I had to leave because I wasn't safe. I would just obsess over just anything. So how exactly did I overcome this? Well, first, you know, for some people, medication works. For me, it did. I changed my medication, still for bipolar disorder, but it helped me reduce my anxiety. And with that, it helped me reduce some of my thoughts. But ultimately, the biggest thing was that I, through therapy, understood how to let those thoughts go. And what I mean by that is that I would have, you know, these terrible scenarios in my head that would happen. And they were really hard to let go of them, because a lot of times we're with people that I love, and I thought, okay, if I don't say this, then it's actually going to happen. And ultimately, what I did is that I took it little by little. I grabbed a small thought that wasn't so severe, right? Because you have some that are like way worse than others. And sometimes those come more whenever you have anxiety. So you have to, when something is stressing you out and stuff like that, so you have to understand what's going on that's making maybe my thoughts worse right now than others. Because side note, whenever I have a lot of anxiety, when something's happening, I'm more likely to have those types of compulsive thoughts, especially now where they're not as common as they used to be. Anyways, so I would grab something that I knew wasn't going to happen. Like in my gut, I knew wasn't going to happen, but my mind was still wanting me to, you know, act upon that trigger. And then I would say, well, that's not true. That can't be true. I would be logical about it. This is why this specific thought isn't going to happen. So then I would not say anything. At first, it was so hard. I'm telling you, it was so difficult to not act upon it. But when I realized that I did not act upon the thoughts that I was having, it got better. It got better over time because I became stronger. I became, you know, stronger in the sense that I didn't have to react to them because I knew they weren't going to happen. A lot of times what happens is that, you know, and this doesn't help, is the thought that sometimes, and I think I learned this in psychology in high school, sometimes whenever you think something's going to happen and then it actually happens, and I mean, that's a coincidence. That's not like an actual thing, you know, that you feel like if you don't say that, especially if you're somebody who has this, you know, compulsive thoughts, you feel like, oh, that's true. See, that time that I thought that something was going to happen and it actually happens means that it's going to do it every single time. But it's actually your brain tricking you. I mean, things like that can happen all the time. You don't actually know if something's going to happen. You might feel like you do, but you don't know for certain. So it's like you have to understand that you can control the compulsive thoughts, because your compulsive thoughts are not right. Think about it this way. Have any of those things actually happened that you thought about? Probably not. And you might say it's because this and this happened, or because I acted upon those compulsive thoughts. But it's not. It's not because of you acting or you saying or you doing something. It just didn't happen. And it was all up here. It was our mind's tricking us. So going back to controlling it, when you have a thought that's going to happen instantly. Let's say my thought was that there's going to be a car crash in 5 seconds. Or if I don't turn on my signal 3 times, the person in front of me is going to die. Well, that's going to be an item, like an event that's going to happen right away. So then I am not going to say anything. I'm going to control myself. And then I'm going to realize that thing didn't happen. You're going to realize that thing was not going to happen, whether you said that or not, whether you did that action or not. So once you start realizing that, you're going to start gaining power. And then you have to get rid of the guilt. And that's another step. So once you start getting, this strength around not saying that for things, I'm not saying it's going to be perfect. It's not perfect. When something that I really, really care about is like at risk in my compulsive thought, I'm not going to lie to you. I still say those phrases, but they're just not as loud as they used to be. Anyways, then it's the guilt. See, you have a guilt of maybe not saying the phrase. I don't care about those people enough, so I'm not going to do the action, the compulsive thing that my brain is telling me to. You have to let go of that guilt. Whenever I used to sing a lot, and when I was singing, sometimes I would have a compulsive thought, so I couldn't finish the song because I had to say the phrase that I said, and then I could start singing again. But it was so destructive. Like, imagine, being at a theater, dancing, all this kind of stuff, and then you have to stop dancing, or you have to stop doing something that you love because you had a compulsive thought. That's no way of living. And that's also, obviously, with the help of therapy, it gets better. But going back to the guilt. So you might feel guilty about having terrible thoughts. When something terrible happens, let's say a store gets robbed, you're like, could I ever do that? And you know that you wouldn't ever do that. But your compulsive thoughts are telling you that you could do that, and they're making you feel really guilty about all these thoughts that are terrible, of terrible people, and you would never do that. So that's another obsessive thought that's creating scenarios, creating stories in your head that just aren't true, and making you do something to make them a lie, or making you feel so guilty that you might not be able to get through the day because you feel so bad. Well, the thing is, those things aren't you. And you have to realize how to separate yourself from those thoughts. Gosh, I still get thoughts like that sometimes. And it's so annoying because at first I would get attached to those thoughts and I would say, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible person. Like, why would I even think of that? Like, all this kind of stuff. And then I learned that wasn't me. That was my head messing with me. And I needed to separate myself. I acknowledged a thought and then I let it go. And that helped me so much because I started letting go of that guilt. I separated myself from my thoughts, and that liberated me from feeling guilty. Now, sometimes it can be hard, but I think realizing that's not me was one of the key things for me being better. Now when I have those thoughts, I understand that there's a thought, and then I say, okay, I'm probably thinking that because my brain wants to obsess over the fact of this and that, but I know it's not true, and I know that's not going to happen, so then I let it go. And little by little, you're going to realize that by doing these two things, and also by getting therapy, maybe getting medicated if you need to, by doing all these things, your life is going to improve so much more. And your thoughts are not going to rule your life. You're not going to have to always do this thing or act upon what you're thinking. It takes practice, but it's definitely possible. And I know that my life has gotten so much better by it. Things that used to give me so much anxiety, that would give me compulsive thoughts, I don't let it anymore. I just stay calm, breathe, and understand that those things are in my head. That if it's a bad situation, that's not me. And then ultimately, I feel better and I don't let it rule my day. It's just a thought, and that's it. I think for some people, meditation might help because it helps you control your thoughts more and gain that practice. But these are the things that I've done, and as I said before, I'm not perfect, but I try to always do things that will make me stronger, that will make me and my life better, and that will make me happier. And by conquering these little things, I get to share with you guys to hopefully also help your life be better. So if you like this video, please like it, comment, and please don't forget to subscribe. It's so helpful for me. And comment, tell me what you want to hear about in the future, and share this video with somebody who you believe should watch this video. So with that, always remember that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and a bad day does not mean a bad life.